Pleasure it is to be here. I'm Patricia Polacco, and I write and illustrate children's picture books. Now, for those of you that may not know my background, I'll give you just a quick kind of synopsis. My mother's people are Russian and Ukrainian. My father's people are Irish. Go figure. I don't know quite how they got together, but they did. And coming from that background, both of these types of people are fabulous storytellers. So most of my life, I've been used to sitting and listening to stories being told. People ask me, how do you suppose you ended up being a writer? It would have to be because of coming from storytelling. When I was little, for instance, the penultimate storyteller in our household was my grandmother. And we used to sit and listen to her. We didn't watch stories being told. We sat and listened to them. Probably the second reason I ended up being an author is because guess what contraption wasn't in my house that you all have? TV. I have them now, but then no TV. So every evening we listened to wonderful stories being told. And she used to call this time of telling fire talking. She put a fire in the fireplace in the living room. She'd go in the kitchen and pop a huge bowl of popcorn. If we were lucky, she made fudge. She'd pick snow apples off from the trees outside, and my brother and I'd go in with our little bowls, and she'd wedge apple and put in some fudge and popcorn. Then she'd say, "Go in living room. I'm going to come in and fire talk to you." And we'd go in and sit down, and she'd come in and explode into stories. I've heard all of her stories. I swear I've heard them 1,000 times over. And each time she told them, they got better. I do remember whenever she finished a story, though, my brother and I would lean into her and say, "Okay, that story you just told, is that a true story?" She'd look at us over her glasses and say, "Well, of course it's a true story, but it may not have happened." What she was saying is profound, and I do believe this. All stories are true, all of them. Whether the circumstance they're describing ever happened or not doesn't matter. The truth is the journey you take. Did it make you laugh? Did it make you cry? Did it make you wonder about things? Did it make you seek and want justice? That's the truth of a story. So, reading, however, was not that simple for me. I'll give you another insight into who I am. Many of you probably know this, but for those of you who don't, you're looking at a learning disabled student who grew up. I did not learn to read till I was 14 years old. I have dyslexia, dysnumeria, dysgraphia, and failure of sensory integration. So as a young person, had a pretty rough time in school. Couldn't identify words, couldn't hold still. I'm an advocate, as a matter of fact. I wish rocking chairs were in every classroom in our country for kids like me. Because if you're giving me information now that I'm responsible for and I have to know, I'm going to start moving while you tell me, because if I'm holding still, it just doesn't go in. I don't know how else to describe it. If you're teachers, I was a kid that would head for the swings the minute I got to school. You would have to drag me off from them. The more I would swing, the dizzier I got. The more dizzy I was, the more clarity I had. I slept with weight on me at night and would roll in bed until I was dizzy. Then I could go to sleep. This is all sensory integration stuff. I didn't know that's what it was. Didn't find out this phrase till much later in my life. But in our household, the youngest person in the house, it's interesting, usually at about 4, they will have the child stand in a room. They put a book in their hand, and the whole family surrounds them. They take honey, and they deliver it to the cover of the book. Then they'll say to the child, "Taste of this." And the kid tastes it, and then the family asks, "What does it taste like?" And the answer is, "Well, it's sweet." Then the family chimes in all together, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee that made this honey. You're going to have to chase it through the pages of a book. So for me, this was a promise I could not wait to fulfill, but it never came. I got all the way to my 14th year, and I didn't know how to read. I identified words enough so that my educators, I managed to fool them. I had a cadre of students who helped me cheat and helped me literally, this was an amazing network of what we did to fool my teachers. I didn't want my teachers to know that I was dumb and stupid, because I thought if they knew that, they wouldn't like me anymore. And for me, it was vital that they care about me. So take yourself, when I was 14 years old, I was at Willard Junior High in Berkeley, California. That's when I actually learned to read. And in California, they have the semester system where you go to school until January, you have a break, and then you go back to school until June. But they changed out our teacher, and in through the door in January bounded this tall, elegant, amazing man who wore colors like this. And in those days, most teachers wore color like my pants. And his ties were bright, and he was effusive, and when he talked, he moved his arms, and he was just, when he came in, he put growing things on all the window ledges. He put posters of the masters up on the walls, and he played music during class, classical music, but music just the same, very quiet music. He had a lamp on his desk. There was ambient light, and the room suddenly became a place that was like home. It wasn't a place to go be tortured in every single day. And I was also being tortured by a group of bullies. I might tell you a book that's coming out, I think, next fall is called Bully, and it's about cyberbullying among girls. Not for very small children, but I would say 5th grade on up. At any rate, so I don't think bullying is cute. I don't think there's an excuse for it, and I get intolerant of adults that say, oh, come on, kids are kids, that's what they do. They were born loving. They have learned cruelty. I think they can unlearn it. At any rate, I was sad, upset, just in such despair. And one day, Mr. Falker, his real name was Felker, by the way, not Falker. I don't know if you know this, but I could draw you and use you in a book without your permission, but I can't use your name. If I use his name, we have to consult his lawyers and the lawyers of the publisher to get his permission. So at the time, I hadn't contacted Mr. Falker. I didn't think I had to, and the lawyer said, oh, I don't think so, dear. So by changing one letter of his last name, we satisfied the law. At any rate, he came in and he asked me one day, and he was one of the few who noticed that I had an amazing ability for art. Now, I think that's because of the division of the brain. The part of the brain that is very academic on me does not work well. So the other side goes into hyperdrive, which is the creative, artistic side. So I could draw light years ahead of my age group. I understood congruency of 3 dimension, yet I couldn't do math. Interesting, isn't it? At any rate, he asked me to stay after school one day to help him wash blackboards. Now, you young people have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. You have smart boards now, don't you? Those white things with, I guess they use markers on them. But in the old days, they were slate with white chalk, but then they had a huge technological outbreak where they were green with yellow chalk. Anybody remember that? Chalk is chalk. So it meant you had to wash the boards. So at the end of the day, Mr. Falker asked me to stay after school and help wash blackboards. Now this is on the heels of, in our country today, no male teacher may remain in a room with a female student. What have we become? So he asked me to come help him. And I brought my little shot, my little bucket, and my little sponge. He put on My Fair Lady. I'll never forget this. And I'm going like 90 on that board. And he came up behind me and he said, Patricia, I think I know something about you. You're having difficulty, aren't you? And I could feel everything come up into my throat because of all people that I wanted to love me, I wanted him to care about me. And if he knew I was dumb, he wouldn't. And I started to cry and he said, you know, I think you have something that has a name. I think there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people like you. You're not the only one. And he said, now, I can't help you. I don't know what to do. He said, but I've got a friend who can. And I remember when he came up behind me and he discovered the most terrible secret I had, I wanted to run. He put his hand in the center of my back and stopped me. To this day, when I come up against something that I don't think I can face, I can feel his hand. I can feel it as sure as it's there. And I can almost hear him whispering here saying, you can do it. So he got a friend of his, her name was Ruth Plessy, who was a reading specialist, and this was in the days when we didn't have reading specialists. She worked with me 4 nights a week, and I can't tell you exactly what brought the aha moment. We tried balance boards, colored acetates, climbing, different gymnastics. Believe it or not, physicality has something to do with one's ability to read. But I remember the day that I could look at a page and understand a sentence, that writing means something. I could sound it out phonetically and then go through my Rolodex, find the word that I have heard many times in my life that I know the meaning of, and realize that's the same word and that's what it looks like. Got through that sentence, and then it was as if a pall had lifted off of my shoulders. The next sentence came even easier than the paragraph, than the entire page. And I remember running home that night after my lessons with them and going into my mother's kitchen. And my mother was a teacher. She was a classroom teacher. Think of it, she had no idea. And I got a jar of honey out of the cupboard. I went to my mother's bookshelf and I grabbed the thickest, heaviest book I could. And I poured honey on the cover. And I tasted the honey because I knew my life had changed. And that George Felker saved me, literally pulled me into the light. You think he isn't my hero? Absolutely. And from then on, I realized my teachers were people I should trust with the information. I didn't trust anybody. But I had to finally tell them, I don't know what you're talking about. And they were, in every case, I didn't have one who rejected me or made me feel ridiculous. They took every power they had to help me and changed everything for me. I could give you a cadre and list of teachers that would go on for an hour who changed my life. And I believe our teachers in our country are the last standing heroes we have. And they're being killed in this country by the No Child Left Behind mandate. This mandate forces them to teach your children how to pass tests. Vast difference than teaching this child to love the subject and to want to figure out how it's done. So teachers are paying with their blood now. They're playing with their lives are being destroyed. I think we need to rethink this. I do believe we have to have assessment, but this broad brush is just not working. It isn't working. And I think maybe the family needs to be looked at harder. That some of these kids who can't do this come from homes where they're not getting help. Some of them have wonderful parents who are doing everything. That doesn't mean a thing. And I think young people, when they're having these difficulties, believe with all of their heart that they're stupid and they're dumb. The truth of the matter is, because they just finished 37 years of study, young people in special classes are almost in every case drop-dead geniuses. They are so brilliant, we have no idea how to access most of what they know, and they know things. So when I go to schools, I love to tell these children that they're not, don't count yourself out, please. So I've written about George Felker. The book that I wrote, I was with George Felker. The year I learned to read was at about 14. 15, did a year of school in Williamston, Michigan, and the book that describes that is Junkyard Wonders, because my parents were divorced, and I spent the summer with my dad and the school year with my mom, and that summer begged my father and mother, please let me go to school here in Williamston because nobody here knows I'm dumb and I can reinvent myself and I might even be pretty here. Maybe I can be a cheerleader. Maybe I can be somebody. Never realizing that my records would be sent from California to Michigan. So I was put then in a remedial class that the whole school called the junkyard. But the individuals that were in that class with me, that's what that book is about. And when you see what they all became, it'll restore your faith in there's nothing wrong, you guys, in being different. It's actually an asset. Eventually it becomes an asset. But then the book that's kind of following all of that is here's another teacher who put another piece in place. Every teacher I had after that put another piece of the puzzle together as to the very complex reason I don't do what you do. If all of you look at that exit sign up there, most of you are going to see the red letters. I don't. I'm reading the space that surrounds them. I'm looking at negative space. There is no discipline in our school system that teaches the appreciation of negative space except art.